Now, repentance requires commitment. I used to smoke. Now, let's be clear, it was tobacco. And this was from the ages of about 14 to 27. And I started innocently enough. I followed my father's example. And by the time I was 24 and a growing Christian, I became convinced that what I was doing was stunting my relationship with God. It was a sin. So I determined to rid myself of the problem. So for 3 years, I struggled, prayed, cried, and smoked some more. It wasn't until I committed my life to remove the sin that I was successful. Well, if you're joining us in going through the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, today's reading is Ezra 10, verses 8 through 17, and I encourage you to read that passage. Ezra 10, verses 9 through 11 says this: So all the men of Judah and Benjamin assembled at Jerusalem within the 3 days. It was the 9th month, on the 20th of that month, and all the people were sat in the open square before the house of God, and they were trembling because of the matter and the heavy rain. And then Ezra the priest stood up and said to them, You have been unfaithful and have married foreign wives, adding to the guilt of Israel. Now, therefore, make confession to the Lord, the God of your fathers, and do his will, and separate from the peoples of the land and from the foreign wives. Well, changing your life requires repentance. It requires a commitment to the cause. Giving repentance lip service and going about it half-heartedly only digs a deeper and more difficult hole from which to climb out. So, what was the driving force behind my repentance of smoking? In a word, it was school. Tony and I had left the Army to go to Bible college and seminary and then return as active duty as a chaplain. The school had a rule that you could not smoke and attend the school. So it was either continue to smoke or give it up for something more important. Now the choice was simple, and it was made. And once it was made, there was only one time, 3 weeks later, in which I wanted a cigarette. I bummed one from a friend and I lit it. When I inhaled, I thought I was going to die. I immediately put the cigarette out and haven't wanted one since that time. Now, when the exiles made up their minds, they did what they were supposed to do. Now, you may have missed it in the reading, but in verse 9, it tells us that they were gathered in a heavy rain. They were cold and they were miserable. Now, prior to most people true repenting of sin, they are miserable. Now, it may not be that they are standing or sitting in a cold rain, but it may feel like that. Read Psalm 51, Psalm 50 for the Eastern Orthodox Christians, and observe how David describes his psychological state before confession and repentance. Misery always precedes repentance. It may not be overwhelming, but it will be there. Today is the day of our repentance. Search your heart and see what is reducing the effectiveness of your walk with Christ, and then turn to God in repentance.